this series is based on things that those of us who have opened, started, or bought centers wish we had known before we got started. Funding for this series is provided by Workforce Solutions Rural Capital Area, and we want to make sure we thank them at every opportunity for making this possible for us because they invest in childcare. So, cracking the code, where to open, and what to charge for maximum success. I'm Carrie Casey. My real estate history. I had a registered family home in my house. That is what home care that is regulated inside the home is either a registered or a licensed family home. So I had that. Then I had a house that I turned into a childcare center, and I had to get something called a conditional use permit because the property right next to us had the appropriate zoning, ours did not. And so we had to go through a city zoning process called a conditional use permit application. And then I bought two schools that were originally homes, but they were homes in the early 1900s and one in the late 1800s when they were originally built. They had been remodeled into commercial buildings and were properly zoned before I took them over. And then the fourth location had previously been a childcare center. So what are we going to do today? We are going to learn about the power of location. There are three things that matter when you are building your business: location, location, and location. We're going to talk about strategic pricing, and we're going to talk a little bit about the tools that you may need. We are using the word childcare in its broadest sense. So if you're wanting to open a nursery, an infant toddler program, a co-op, a faith-based program in a church, an after-school program, a Montessori school, a Waldorf school, a Mother's Day Out, a drop-in center, a get well program. I'm probably still forgetting one or two. Out of school time, we're using the term camps. Yes, we're using the term childcare for all of that. Okay, let's talk about the dream of opening, purchasing your center versus the reality. What we would love is that there is a perfect location built exactly to your specifications, right off of two major roads in your town that already has a playground. Like, that's what we would love. That is not what is going to happen. You are going to find a location that meets a good amount of your criteria, and you're going to probably have to do some build out. Build out is real estate ease for you're going to have to do some remodeling. We have to figure out what the number one, number two, number three, what are your biggest priorities with that ideal location? When I opened my first center, I wanted it between four roads. I wanted it between two different highways. I wanted it between two different regular streets in town. I could not find a property that was in my budget that was in those four streets, but I found it about 3 blocks north of the north end of my little quadrant that I had outlined. So it wasn't very far out of my ideal image, and it needed to meet the zoning requirements, and it needed to have enough square footage for what I wanted to do. So regardless of what I envisioned in my head, I envisioned a program right smack dab downtown. I could not afford the few properties I found that had enough outdoor space, enough parking, and were in the right zoning in Central Austin. So I went just a little bit outside. Some people might be like, no, I need to be in this region, this neighborhood. And to be in that neighborhood, I'm willing to have a slightly larger building or a slightly smaller building, or maybe it has open land and so I'm going to have to pave some of it to be my parking lot. You will have to have some give and take. Your location can make or break you. When we are talking about a childcare business, most childcare businesses are businesses of convenience, meaning that most, if not all of your clientele will either work or live within 2 miles of your location. Because there's lots of childcare options out there, they're going to choose one that is convenient to them. Exceptions to this rule. If you are living in what is called a childcare desert, meaning there is not enough childcare for the families in that community by a significant degree. How is that determined? They take the total number of kids under the age of 5, they divide it by 3, and if there's not one childcare spot for each of those 1/3 of all the kids, then it's a childcare desert. So that is one of the ways you can become a destination business instead of a convenience business. The other reason is that your program is unique. You have some sort of unique selling proposition. Some Montessori programs can be destinations. Some nature-based programs can be destination childcare businesses, but there has to be something really unique about it if you're going to be a destination childcare business. So what we're looking at is figuring out, are you unique enough that people are going to drive out of their way to come to your program? If not, you need to do a lot of market research about what is within 2 miles of your proposed location. What are the large employers? What are the neighborhoods? What other childcare exists? What elementary schools exist? You need to know. McDonald's takes this so seriously that when you buy a franchise, when you're a franchisor, franchisee with McDonald's, you have a certain length of time that you've bought that franchise for. And if at the end of that time frame, they don't think that your location is a good location for a McDonald's anymore, part of your agreement is you have to demolish your McDonald's because they don't want somebody else to go in there, and they definitely don't want another McDonald's in there because there's not enough clientele. So in childcare, you need employers nearby and you need some residential neighborhoods that have children under the age of whatever your oldest kid that you're going to enroll is. So under the age of 12 or under the age of 6. The other thing we need is that people need to be able to get in and out of your building easily, which means it either needs to be on a major road or near a major road. Because if they have to turn 15 times off of the major road before they get to your building, they're probably not going to come. The other thing that sometimes can get people to come, I talked about being a destination childcare center. Occasionally, having that recognizable name can work to get people to go a little bit out of their way. And we talked about that last week when we were talking about why you might want to use a franchise company to open your business. You might want to buy a franchise. Demographics. Who lives or works nearby? Do they match your target customer? Because remember, we said you have to know what kind of business you want to have. So who wants to buy that thing? Who wants to pick that kind of childcare? Where do they live? Where do they work? The demographics. Is there steady traffic, foot traffic, bus traffic, car traffic, whatever is the type of traffic that your customers would be? Can you have good signage? Make sure that when you're doing signage, you are making sure that it can be read from across a parking lot. Look at the competition nearby. This is the 5th Mother's Day out going in that 2-mile radius. Well, if you're the 5th Mother's Day out in a 2-mile radius, you're probably not filling a need. So you might need to have a different type of childcare business. Maybe that's summer camp that someone was asking about earlier. And make sure that people can get in and out safely. Because again, they're going to have small children with them. This has to be, you have to be paying attention to the safety of that. And is there enough parking? Your city zoning and land use may have specific amounts of parking that you need to have. So let's talk about location red flags. High rent with low visibility, which means they're charging a lot of money, but that location, when people drive by, they can't see your childcare center. So maybe it's not even on a major or a secondary road. Maybe it's way back in a neighborhood. Another thing is if the only way that you're going to be able to fill up your program is with the school bus dropping kids off at your school. The school district can change their plans tomorrow on what they're doing as far as busing, and they may not be providing that anymore. If the only way people get to your program is that you are right next to the elementary school, so school busing, or they're dropping the pre-K kid off before dropping the elementary school kid off, what happens when that elementary school starts offering pre-K? Those people are going to go to the elementary school because then they don't have to get out of their cars twice. So pay attention to that. Another thing to pay attention to is that there's lots of good traffic, but the traffic doesn't match that ideal client we talked about before, right? It could be those low-income families that you wanted because you want to have, you want to be serving the low-income community. Well, if they're not in that area, then that's not a good location for you. Or on the other hand, if you're wanting to serve the work from home population and want to have a Mother's Day Out program, if everybody who's there is working in an office, that's not your ideal client. So it might be busy, but with the wrong clientele. So long build outs, meaning there is a lot of remodeling that needs to be done to that building. You have to put in 6 new bathrooms and 12 new sinks and a whole new playground, and you have to take apart part of the fence so that you can bring in the fall surfacing, and you're putting in half walls and full walls and windows and adding 3 more exterior doors for fire exits and rewiring the building and putting in sprinkler systems. I know of one program that did all of that. Well, that's going to be a long build out. And if you have to pay rent from the day you sign the lease until the build out is finished, you're going to have months and months and months that you're paying rent on a building that is generating absolutely no revenue. There are ways around that if you have a good realtor, but pay attention to that. Zoning issues. You need to be crystal clear on what zoning codes allow the type of childcare you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to do it in your home, are all of the home zonings going to allow that, or only multifamily 2 and above? Because in some cities, single family residences will not let you have any business inside your home, and that would include a home-based childcare business. If you're doing it in a commercial space, it may only be certain types of commercial zoning that will allow the type of childcare you're wanting to do. So you have to know what zoning will allow childcare so that your childcare business is not right next to the 24/7 liquor store or the manufacturing plant that is making fertilizer. So if we are looking at a new location, we need to look at how much traffic is coming by. So you need to, at different times of the week, go and see how much traffic there is, what kind of vehicles are going, what kind of walking traffic, etc. You want to go talk to the neighboring businesses, find out how things are going. And then you want to also use online tools like the census data. Census data is amazing. You can get so much information on the type of education the people in your area have, where, how much income, how many family members, all kinds of stuff. So the census data is amazingly helpful. You can also parse that usually with your Chamber of Commerce. Okay. Spend the time to find out about the market. It is very, very helpful. So, you've got to figure out how to price your tuition. You've got to figure out what kinds of tuition you're going to have. Are you going to collect it weekly? Are you going to collect it monthly? Are you going to just have full-time, or are you going to have full-time and one of the different kinds of part-time? What are you going to have? So my suggestion, and you don't have to take it, but I will tell you, I have been in the industry a really long time, is that you have a type of full-time and a type of part-time. Do not have 5 different types of part-time. So what are some of the types of part-time? Well, if you're doing out of school time, there is after school time, there's before and after school time, and then there's all day care, right? For spring break, Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, right? So that's the full time, is summer break and those other holiday breaks. And the part time is just after school or after school and before school. When we're talking about younger kids, you might have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Tuesday, Thursday be one of your part-time. So you have kids different days of the week, or some do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday. Other programs do a morning shift. You come in anytime after we open and you stay until 12 or 12:30, and then you go bye-bye. And then new kids come in at 12 or 12:30 and they stay until the end of the day, and that's their part-time. And if you're a Montessori program, the type of part-time they offer is that it'll be, you come in the morning and you stay until about 2 o'clock. And then that's when the school day ends, or 3 o'clock. And then the full time would be until 6 or 6:30. So have a part-time and a full-time type of tuition that you are charging. But how do you figure out what to charge? Because if you underprice, you can't grow, because you can't afford to improve your program, hire the best people. You can't get better. A lot of times people are like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be the cheapest program in town. That's not generally the best idea, because somebody can always come in and be cheaper than you. Instead, price yourself appropriately to the value that you offer. And if you overprice, you can also have a problem, because nobody will come to you, because what you're charging doesn't match what you're offering. So you've got to find out, how do I hit the just right point? So you've got to look at the math. This is a very key thing to do in many parts of your business plan, which is doing math. So the first part is, how much does it cost to provide the care you want to provide? How much does it cost? Rent, utilities, labor, supplies. How much does all of that cost? What are the market expectations? What do other people charge? You don't want to be the highest and you don't want to be the lowest. And you want to be offering stuff at a similar price point to the other programs in your area. You can be above it or below it. but you need to know what other people are expecting. Okay. So, your brand position, are you the spiffiest? Are you a niche, or are you budget friendly? And then making sure that you've got an appropriate profit margin. You can have a basic tuition rate and then a standard and then a premium. How do we do that in childcare? Because when we're thinking about that, you're usually thinking of like burgers or clothing or something like that. So how do we do that in childcare? The basic would be, these are the hours and this is the type of tuition I want to charge. Then you might have, okay, instead you can stay till 6:30, and then the premium, your diapers, your formula, and all of your food and 3 uniforms are included. Okay. So that's one way to increase your revenue. You can bundle things in, allowing people to pay annual tuition works for that, and pay attention to what's called psychological pricing. People would rather buy something for $49 than for $50. They'd rather buy it for 47 than for 50. That feels like they're really saving some money. It's just $3, but it feels very different emotionally. And then the last concept I want to talk about there is what's called anchor pricing. And so you can go, the example we typically use when we're talking about this is, if you were to have a nanny come into your home, it would cost this much money. Instead, you are saving a whole ton of money because you are paying for our childcare. The people you want on your team as you are making this decision about your location. You've got to have a realtor. You probably want it to be a commercial realtor, because a residential realtor will only be able to show you houses, and then you're going to have a zoning change most of the time. You're going to want a coach or a consultant, somebody who's been through this procedure before. So hire a coach or a consultant to help you go through this process. You're going to want a lawyer because somebody has to review your lease or your mortgage agreements. Okay. And if you have a partnership or anything else, you need a lawyer. You're going to need an accountant or a bookkeeper. You're going to need a banker, and the banker needs to know your name. You need to learn the city business development department and the city land use development department, or county if you're in the county, before you sign a lease or purchase agreement. Verify with the city or county what that property is zoned, and that zoning will work for the use you want. You need it in writing from the city. Make sure that you know the fire code and that you know the health code that is going to be relevant. How many sinks do you need in the kitchen? What kind of dishwasher do you need? Do you need something called a grease trap? If you don't know what that is, write it down and ask your health department, will you need that for the amount of food service you're doing? What kind of fire suppression or smoke detection do you need based on the number of kids you want to have in that building? So if you want more information from the presenters, you can scan this code. And I'm going to go to the next one. This is my podcast, Childcare Conversations.